I'm going to talk about the web-based image access, or WIA, for some of you that follow radiology like a lot. You may have heard the name MHD-I, or Mobile Access to Health Document for Imaging, previously. It is actually a replacement of MHD-I. We changed the design, and because of some of the underlying details, it's no longer very similar to MHD, so we actually changed the name to WIA. So this is the new profile. Oops, sorry. So what we're trying to solve with like general imaging access. So basic common thing, we need to have secure web access to imaging studies. Like there is many imaging source that generate images, whether it's a PACS or stored in a VNA. Those are not islands. We need to connect them. So we also want to have like a common integrated access, just like many other information. So using web technologies is a good way to do that, so that applications can integrate not only other clinical information but also images as part of that whole ecosystem. So we need to make sure images can be like part of that ecosystem and have secure web access to studies. Also, at the same time, we want to make sure that the studies can be shared, and not only share, but also provide interactive viewing, because as many of you know, images, they're not static. We need to have like an interactive viewing capabilities to show those images. And last but not least, want to make sure the images can be integrated to the rest of the ecosystem in a clinical setting, just as easy as other information. Traditionally, we kind of have imaging as a separate like island, because it has special need as a special viewer, but that becomes more and more difficult. So we want to make sure that the integration part is just as easy to the rest. And last but not least, we want to make sure that the infrastructure that we're providing can integrate with, like, if you have a DICOM backend, that's good. If you have an XDS backend, that's good too. And also, if you're moving on to the new Firebase backend, such as MHD, that can also work. So we're not tied to a specific backend. So let's see how we can do that. So the value of WIA, this profile, is to provide a method for image sharing and interactive viewing of imaging studies using the RESTful services provided by DICOM, such as WADO-RS and QIDO-RS. There's already another profile that published earlier. It's called Web-Based Image Capture, that uses the STO-RS. So that lets you use RESTful services to push DICOM objects from the sender to the recipient. And this profile complements that by allowing you to use RESTful web services to query retrieve. In terms of the technical highlight, the actor transaction diagram is actually very simple. We have a consumer that can query to an imaging document responder and retrieve from an imaging document source. The backend, how the imaging document responder and the imaging document source is actually not like specific to the consumer. So from the consumer perspective, it is the same transaction, and one responder may be interacting with a DICOM backend, and another responder may be interacting with the XDS-I backend. But from a consumer perspective, there's no difference. So that makes integration, especially from the consumer perspective, much easier, and enable much easier integration at the consumer side. And also, as I mentioned earlier, it has also integration with the ITI domain MHD profile, the mobile access to health document. So when the MHD document consumer find some clinical document that actually refers to an imaging document, then some of the metadata can be used directly within WIA for more efficient interaction with the imaging documents. So I'll talk about that more details in a second. So let's look at how WIA actually works. It's actually very straightforward. So there are two steps. The first step is you, as an imaging document consumer, you can, let's say you want to find studies for patient 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. What you can do is use a QIDO-RS query, query to the imaging document responder, which will then return some response that gives you some patient and study level information. And with that information, part of it is the retrieved URL, which is a WADO-RS URL. And based on that information, then the second step is you can use that URL to retrieve the study from the imaging document source. So you fire off the WADO-RS request, and it will return the images to you. As a consumer, you can use that URL, and if you know how to use the WADO-RS specification, you can actually tag on additional metadata to the URL. For example, then you can get the metadata, or you can get the thumbnail if the imaging document source support that. So the response in the QIDO-RS only provides you the base URL that gets you the images. But as a consumer, you can actually tag on additional parameters to the URL to get additional functionalities. So that seems very basic, like query retrieve. So now what we can do about that? So the interesting thing, now we're getting into the interactive viewing part. As we support QIDO-RS, which is a query just like DICOM C5, you can actually get many more metadata out of the query. So for example, during an interactive viewing, a consumer quite commonly, it needs to get more metadata about the study in order to identify which images I need to show in which viewport in the display part. So quite often it needs more metadata than just the patient and study metadata. So what you can do is using QIDO-RS, but not query just the patient and study level, but you actually query for instance series level information. And the response will come back with additional information at the series and the instance level. For example, here in the example, you see you can return series, instance UID, and modality, image number, rows, columns. Those kind of information give the consumer additional information to prepare for the display of the images. Or if you need actually more detailed information because of some of the advanced imaging, you actually need some more detailed information in the DICOM header. Then an alternative way is to actually get the full header of the images, and you can use WADO-RS to do that by getting the metadata. So in that case, the imaging document source will return not the pixel data, but actually the full header of the images. You can get that at the series level, or if you want to get a specific instance, you can do that as well.